Welcome back to Drive World, and today I'm going to be talking about a system that the developers seriously need to add to the game. If you played at the end of November last year, you might remember this little button that popped up in the UI, and when you tried clicking it, nothing would show up, so there wasn't really an idea of what was inside of it, but it showed the developers were planning something pretty big here. But if you play the game right now, one of the biggest issues you'll see is when first starting the game, you have almost no guide of what you're supposed to do. You're basically just thrown into the game, and you're given the ability to do races, jobs, shadow races, weeklies, dailies, go into other maps, doing auctions, and players are simply just given too many options to pick from in the game. And with that, I think a feature that Drive World seriously needs to add is the campaign system. As a new player, when you're starting the game, you'll pick your starter car and then go to a race, and you're never going to want to race people that are using the meta cars. You might go against a car like the Strato, Vanaheim, Blade, Goliath, or the Yasko, and this can completely ruin the experience of a new player, as there's really no point in racing if you just keep losing. And that's why I think there needs to be a system which focuses more on a single player experience. As for someone that wants to play completely solo right now, if you go into quests, this is all you'll have. You have the daily quest, which took over the weekly system, and you only get one car per day, and these are most likely going to be old cars. And then you also have the playtime rewards that reset every 24 hours. And after completing this, you really don't have a single player experience unless you do garages, which the game doesn't really teach you about, or maybe the hunt, which there's only 4 obbies for this. So we really need a feature that focuses on single player and also has a ton of features. And for this, I'll go over my proposition for the campaign system. To start off, I wanted to go over some of the other games and how they're successful with the systems that they have, and explain why a campaign system is way more important than creating a playground without instructions on the systems inside of the game. And to start off, we have Driving Empire system, which is probably the most popular driving game on Roblox right now. And I'm primarily just talking about the systems they have in place for someone to play the game completely solo. So I'm not talking about them adding updates so the game is more playable, or focusing on something like licensed cars that Driving Empire has, which might also bring players, but the gameplay of a game is the most important to keep players playing the game. And Driving Empire does a pretty good job of this, as they allow you to do times in a race for money. And if you play Driving Empire, you'll know that in the races, you're able to play them completely solo. And in this system, if you set a time faster than the quest time, you'll actually get a little bit of money for this. And you can continue climbing up the medals, and you'll slowly get more and more money for this, which is a good system because then it'll allow you to buy the more expensive cars in the shop. But one issue I see with this is the time increases are such marginal amounts that you actually end up beating that time after it. So you'll end up having to do the race 2 times to get that time completed, which obviously isn't a bad thing really for the game, because then you're playing the game for longer. But a player might beat that time and feel like they've already experienced that race and they just won't do it again. In a way, I feel like they could fix this, which I haven't done the full system, so I'm not exactly sure what they all have in place, but I believe every race is just giving you money. So if they were to change it up to give you cars or accessories, which I don't think Driving Empire has, I feel like just giving players other things that they can go for is more important than money. But overall, I think Driving Empire has a pretty big amount of content that you can do as a solo player, and you'll be able to keep coming back and get more money. And now onto Vehicle Legends, which I've played a good amount, and maybe they've changed the gameplay systems a little bit since I last played. But the last time I played, there really wasn't any tutorials, there wasn't any quests or like anything that you could actually do as a solo player. And it's basically like a playground where you could do whatever you want, which it's still important to give players the ability to pick for themselves, but not providing gameplay inside of this will only result in a lack of content and inability to hold players. So they need to put more focus in providing players with ways to make money, and like instead of forcing you to go into races or just drive around the map, there really isn't any content. But if you played this game before, you've probably experienced this, where you'll max out a car and there's really no point in buying another one, since you've already experienced the entire gameplay loop and it'll only be repetitive after this. And on top of this, they also have bikes, boats, and planes, which all experience the same thing, where you can buy them, but they don't offer anything, and I'm pretty sure all those actually pay less in their races that they have. And then we have Car Dealership Tycoon, which is a completely different system, but the whole system is kind of built around the single player experience. So in this game, you can buy tycoons and then you'll slowly upgrade them with the money that you make from the tycoon, or you can drive around, do races for extra money. But the whole game allows you to play it as a solo player instead of having to go out and do races with other people. And then also they have a system where it's multiple different tycoons, so you can complete a tycoon and you'll feel the completion combination of that, and then you're able to go to another one and get the same effect. And with that in mind, with the Drive World campaign system, if they get different sections where you have to level up your cars and you'll get big rewards at the end of them, I think this is an important way to get people to come back to the game over and over again. You could also follow the car dealership tycoon system into Drive World, where we already have garages that are basically just tycoons, where when you get to specific milestones like 50%, 25%, 75%, or 100%, you'll end up getting special accessories or even cars for completing them. Because as it stands right now, it's not worth it to even upgrade the garages at all, because you're putting all this effort in just to showcase your cars, which nobody's even going to look at them really. But even just providing a basic car would be a big enough incentive for people to actually go and complete them, as those cars would be pretty rare and probably sell for a lot. But now that we've looked into the other games and understood their systems for single player, I think we can move back into Drive World and focus on creating a system that really works with the players. And to start off with how I think the campaign system should work, I think progression is the most important part to how the campaign will be received. If the campaign doesn't have a progression system in place that's able to carry people through the entire game and it be consistent to where you're constantly able to progress through the game, I don't think the reception for this update will be good. We'll also need a lot of gameplay that you can do throughout the entire campaign, so you can go from the very start of the game to the very end of the game. Meaning you can work from the starter cars all the way up to the best cars like the Yesco, Strato, and Blade. And like I said with the CDT Tycoons with a definitive end, I think it's important to have multiple different endpoints in the campaign that you can end up leaving off at and still feeling accomplished. And also providing a definitive end for the entire campaign that players can also see. Because it's really important for players to be able to see the end of something so that they actually continue going through and they slowly see that they're progressing and getting closer to the end. And then also giving players the ability to play by themselves is an extremely important thing, because a lot of players don't have friends or just don't want to play with other people because they might be better than them or too slow for them, and the game just feels boring. But with the campaign system and having good progression, it'll actually feel good pursuing that next reward, and players will want to keep going while also being slow enough that the game can still explain every part of the game. Like if you start the game as a new player, you'll really see that there's no explanation for anything. It'll quickly throw you into the garage and not really tell you how to upgrade it and how to continue upgrading it and how you can put your cars in there, and it'll just throw you into the shop, not really explaining it further after you see it. And there's a whole bunch of other systems in the game that are kind of just left for dead that could be implemented into this campaign system. And in this system, it should slowly get players to level up different cars and pursue them through challenges, ensuring that they continue getting harder over time. And there's a problem with the developers that they end up experiencing with the quests where some are too hard for players on the lower end devices. And I think the solution for this is just giving easier quests that will slowly level up, and those level ups will just end up giving you more money, which players can choose to do, but they don't have to do. So let's say there's a shadow race where you have to complete race circuit in 2 minutes. That could be the base level one that you'll have to do, and then you'll have to do 1 minute and 50 and then 1 minute and 40, and the 1 minute and 40 will provide the most money. But you can choose to do all those, and you're not required to do all of them. You could just do the first one if you just want to speed run through it, but you can go back and get more money from those quests, which can be put into upgrading those low level cars when you first start the game. And I think it's really important that they put focus on upgrading multiple different cars, because most players, when they get to the very end of the game, they believe that there's just one single car that they have to use for everything, when really you have to use one car for top speed, one for race circuit, one for more high speed but still turns, and then you also have stuff like manual where you have to learn manual, and some cars are better that way, which I don't think the manual side of things is that important. I don't think they need to put that into the campaign or anything. But if they were to make it to where you have to upgrade multiple different cars, I think they need to add a system where multiple cars on top of just like top speed and race circuit stuff should be added. And for this, a lot of people still want it back. We have score, and I think score is a really good system that could be added to the campaign and be taught, and I think it would actually perform really well if it was actually just taught in the game, because if you're actually around when score was a thing, they had no explanation for it at all. So players would go and upgrade a car, and once it passed that restriction, they wouldn't be able to do a lot of the races and would just leave the game because they feel that there's no point of buying another car. And in the rewards, they could be adding cars that could be locked to a specific score so players can't go over it, and they would understand how score is important for the game. And the quest getting harder is really important for the more dedicated players as they're looking for a more hard experience, but it's also possible for the casual players to do it if they just want to do those easier times. But as you can see, a lot of players that are brand new to the game will slowly start leveling up and they get to the point of being an experienced player, and the game doesn't provide anything for this and they end up just leaving the game. And it's really important that we focus on putting more effort into the experienced players and providing them with something that they can do, so the player count will stay higher. And now I wanted to go into some more detail on how the quest system should actually work. And something super important that the game has been experiencing a problem with a lot is having a really big variety of quests so it doesn't feel super repetitive. And I believe that there's already systems in place where the quests could have more variety. It's just they haven't really been able to use them as much because like weekly quests, it doesn't really make sense, and everything else doesn't make sense. But if you remember the card decks where we had weekly challenges in a specific area of the card deck, it didn't really make sense for the weeklies because a new player wouldn't be able to get that in time. But the campaign system introducing this would actually be a really good idea. As these quests aren't limited and you can do them anytime you want, I feel like that this would just be a really good way to also spread out the players and get them to understand each different area of a car. And something really important about these quests is they have to be able to be done as a solo player. So it would just be like shadow races or quests that mainly do not require other people. I don't think it's that bad of an idea to get people out of their comfort zone and do a few quests that are with other people, but I don't think the main thing should be forcing people to go and play with other people. Or maybe there's a side of the game that really wants to play with other people and just doesn't like playing by themselves, or they have friends that they want to play with. They can put in challenges that aren't required from everybody to complete, but they'll give more money, or maybe just a small accessory like some of the exhaust effects that have been removed from the game and basically haven't come back for a year now. And with these quests putting a big emphasis on shadow races and score and car decks where you have to try out all these different cars, it'll put way more importance on racing, which I feel like is the main thing that Drive World should be focusing on, is getting everybody into racing and having players do this, as this is the main way that people see if other people like the game. Because if you've actually focused on this on yourself or other people, you'll see that they'll take their opinions based on what other people believe of the game. So if you see someone else that doesn't like the game, your opinion might change on how you feel about the game because they don't like it. And as a new player, going to a race and seeing 5 or even 10 people in a race will completely change your perspective on the game, making it seem like there's way more people playing and a lot of people are enjoying it. And then the quest giving you cars and maybe even upgrades that can be put onto these cars instead of you just buying them with money, which is the same problem that people have with buying cars from the shop, as they feel like they already have a car, so they're not going to spend more money on a car. And they can choose to take these quests at their own pace, but then they'll lose upgrades, whatever. And once they get these rewards, it'll be able to help them on the next quest that they do in the campaign. But this is really important to allow people to go at their own pace, as right now the quest system is forcing you to basically complete them in a week or they're gone forever, which means the devs have to be super strict on what quests they add and how hard they make them, which can ruin the experience for a long-time player like me. So providing a system which does all of these other things the developers haven't been able to do, it would bring new life to the game and would make it feel completely different. And then for the final talking point for how the system will work, the campaign needs really good rewards, which I don't think this is too hard with the systems that they already have in place with nitrous effects and all these accessories that aren't obtainable right now. A lot of players are asking for these exhaust effects and nitrous effects that haven't come back in a really long time, and they were in the Robux shop, but I feel like they should be changed to being rewards in a campaign system or a system similar to this. And on top of this, they could also just use old models of cars like the ones that they just took away from the shop, or old weeklies that they don't feel like are good enough as re-releasing as another weekly. And even if these cars that they're given, like the low shop cars that are actually worse than the cars that they would get through the campaign, the new player won't really care because they didn't spend any money on this car, so they're not really wasting any time on it. And getting this car will be adding it to the car decks, and it'll progress them further through the campaign. And it's also important that the rewards you're given are scaling correctly to the quests that you're having. So if score was introduced and you're in that 800 score range, then getting a car that's at 650 or whatever instead of getting a car that's at 200 score where you have to fully upgrade it. So for the first experience that people will have with the campaign, it's important that the rewards are appealing and are something that the player will actually want. And even if your experience in the game isn't being a new player or the best of the best player, having these wraps and materials and exhaust effects will still be really good to to persist them into actually doing these lower ones, as they're all already asking for these, and I think they're really good to bring back into the system. And now I wanted to go into systems that are either in the game and haven't been updated in a really long time, or systems that were unfortunately removed and I think would be a perfect addition to the campaign system. To start off with the systems that we already have in the game, we have the leveling system and card decks. And as it stands, the leveling system has no use right now other than once you reach level 10 you can go into the auction house. But kind of locking the campaign system behind the leveling system, where you have to do shadow races to get XP to level up, then it could actually teach people about the leveling system and provide rewards for actually leveling up instead of it just being a system that has no use right now. And the best way I believe to add rewards to the leveling system is to get to a specific level before you get a quest that you can do to get these rewards. So even though some players have reached level 50, they can do all those quests, but they'll have to do those quests before they can get those rewards, which is important because a lot of these players reaching level 50 already put in a lot of time to the game and they want more gameplay. So these quests will allow players to put more time into the game, as if the leveling system is just introduced with the rewards right away and a level 50 person just gets all the rewards. They won't get that feeling that new players do, slowly going through those leveling systems and getting those rewards. And I believe this leveling system should have like really big rewards because it's something that you can't really do as a solo. You could do shadow races, but I feel like they should put more focus on the leveling system into playing with other people and getting XP through that instead, and then making the rewards really good so that it can slowly transition people out of the campaign into playing with other people and getting their friends to play with them. And adding that quest system onto the leveling system really doesn't affect the new players, as they'll end up leveling up doing that quest right away, and it'll be basically the same as just giving them stuff right away, but the longer players will actually have stuff that they can do. And then onto a feature which I think is really good, but they just haven't done anything with it, this being the card decks. And I think they need to put more focus on getting more of a variety of cards like the card decks does, but providing rewards for actually getting this variety. A good example of a system that I think could be added to the card decks, which would make it even better than it is right now, is a part of Fortnite Save the World called the collection book. And in here you'll have the different rewards that you get from playing the game, but instead of them forcing you to put these in here and then you'll end up losing them from your inventory, the card decks will just work how it already is in game, where if you have it in your inventory it'll complete it in the card decks, and if you lose it it'll end up going away from your card decks. And another part of the collection book that I think could be added to the card decks is the ability to level up your cars and then also get rewards from this. So the higher you level up your cars, the more rewards you'll end up getting from the card decks. And this will create a purpose of leveling up your cars, as right now just keeping every car full stock, they'll end up selling for more, as a full stock car is rarer than a maxed car. So just creating a system that can allow players to level up their cars, and they'll actually end up trying them as they end up leveling up through this system. And something the devs have put more focus on recently, or in the past year, is collecting, which I don't think is how the game should be. The game should have more focus on racing, but they can implement stuff like the card decks where it'll create more variety, where players will want to race but then also get cars to test out in races as well. And you also have to think of some of the players that do just play the game for collecting, which the card decks would still do, where you can collect cars and you can also level them up and get more rewards, which might also be more cars, which all would still fit into the collecting category that these players are wanting. And also giving players this look into all the cars into the game might persuade them into playing more, as they might see their favorite car, or they'll want to keep collecting so they can get that next reward. And putting a focus on showing how much more you need to get that next reward, because a player saying you need one more car and you need to level it up this much before you get $1 million, they're going to be grinding a whole bunch more. And now that I'm done with the two systems that are currently in the game that I think should be updated, and adding to the campaign system would be perfect, I have two more systems which were unfortunately removed and I think would be amazing in the campaign system. This being score and gear tuning. Like I've already stated before, I think score would be a perfect thing to add into the campaign system, as it's like a perfect milestone type of way to get people to slowly go through the game and understand how upgrading a car can change it. The main issue that players experienced before when score was around was that once you upgraded a car, it would go past the restrictions and then you couldn't do races below. And this would most likely result in people leaving the game, as they don't have a secondary car that is in that range. And instead, they could add quests which give cars in these ranges that are pretty good, so even when they go into these races, they still feel like they're holding up with some of the better players that have already maxed out their cars to the perfect score. And at the start of the campaign, whatever score they would choose as like the the lowest area. So before it was 400, they would just start it off there and you'd slowly level up your cars past there. And if 400 was chosen to be the first score, I think that they should go pretty quickly through that, just like getting players into that 600 range so they feel a lot of change in the game and the cars change really quickly. And I think that would get players to continue playing the game as they feel that fast increase that a lot of players look for. And with the problem of people just upgrading every car to the max, they could lock a car to the specific upgrades, which could be exactly 400 scores, so people can learn that you have to go to the exact number and that'll most likely give the best or fastest car. Or they could even have races where there's a car that's 399 score and then a score that's 400, and the 400 car is actually slower to teach you that upgrades matter and you have to look at the stats of a car instead of just the score. And then cars in the system past this, like at the 600, 800, and 1000 would also have the locking mechanic reach once they hit the score limit so that players don't lose a car in that specific category. And if they want to have a free ranged car that they can choose any score on, they can go to the shop, or there's still going to be some in the campaign system that would allow you to do that. And if they go out of their way to test these cars in the shop, they might be a little bit faster than the ones in the quests, and they can use those instead and complete the quests even easier. And this would allow them to go into those higher, harder quests that they think are impossible with those other cars and have a chance in these shop ones instead. But mainly just focusing on giving them the base car, which if they have the right upgrades and good racing lines, they can still complete those races, and that could be used by the better players that are trying to have a better experience that feels like they're actually being challenged. But not putting in the campaign system too powerful of tutorials to teach players the perfect thing. Instead, giving people in community support and content creators the ability to inform players of the best cars in these areas, and it would promote the game on places like YouTube and TikTok, which would in turn bring more players into the game. And the last thing, which I believe a lot of people have been bringing up now, they're wanting gear tuning back and the ability to really fine tune your cars to exactly how you want it. And this system's really difficult to teach people as there's a lot going on and players don't really grasp what it changes, but I believe it's something that end players should be able to do and enjoy. So I think this should be something at the very end of the campaign. But something I want with the campaign is not just to have a whole bunch of content in it, but also have a defined endpoint, which would be the point of getting the gear tuning. But this also doesn't mean that the campaign just ends at this point. I think that they could continue on past this, but it's more of like a DLC to the campaign. And this point would be like the end of score. But after this, there could be a 400 score challenge where you have to put way better lines into it to actually win and guide people back through the system again at the end, where they might have forgot something at the very start, and make it a little bit difficult as they've been able to become better at the game. And these challenges could put players into a point where they have to learn gear tuning and kind of fix their car so that it actually works in a race. Like getting races like Race Circuit or Figure 8 where you have to tune your car to have really fast acceleration, and teach players which category you have to change to get more turning angle or acceleration in a car. And I believe that if they added gear tuning at the end of campaign, this would be something that a lot of players would actually grind for, and would actually make it worth it to grind through the entire thing no matter how long and how difficult it is. And with gear tuning, only the most dedicated players are going to be using it, so it doesn't really matter if it's at the end and a lot of players don't get it. And with it not really changing too much in a car, it's not really going to affect how new players experience the game, especially with this huge single player experience where they can play everything by themselves and can basically experience any car they want as long as they get enough money through the campaign. And this could be the end all be all customizability after fully grasping how score works, and will allow people to get the perfect score to gear ratio to get the best times on the leaderboards against their friends and other people they're competing against in the leaderboards. And with that, I hope you understand all of the different systems that I want to be added into the campaign system so that it actually feels good. Let me know if you don't think anything in this will work, or if you think something should be changed to better fit your playstyle or prioritized in this system so that it performs well when new players go into it. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry for it being so long, but I'm really passionate about getting this campaign system out, and I'll see you in the next video.